Hey everybody, this is Jason Alba. I have been thinking about doing this for quite a while, and I think it'll be really interesting. And today is the day. So I'm kind of headed out for a few days and wanted to talk about this before I left. So let me just I'm basically just going to tell over the next 15 or 20 minutes a bit of my story. And the whole idea is to share what happened because I wrote a book, and then another book, and then another book, and then another book. So I started Jibber Jobber in May of 2006. So we're 14 years old. We just finished our 14-year anniversary. And when I first started, my comfort zone was on the product development side. It's what I've done my whole career. And so I could like design stuff and deliver it to the developers. And then what I really started to do was learn how to market. And so that was where I spent a lot of my time. And I remember writing blog posts for Jibber Jobber and guest blog posts and guest articles. And anywhere that I could write, I would write. And if I ran out of places to write, or if I kind of got backlogged on my own and I just needed more days because I've already written as much as I could, then I would go out to websites and leave comments and on blogs. And so it was a huge writing strategy, which is what my marketing was in the early days. So anyways, one day, my uncle, who was in transition, he wrote me and he said, I just signed up for Jibber Jobber. What else should I do? And I said, oh, you need to get on LinkedIn. And he says, okay, so I got on LinkedIn. Now what? And I thought, well, that's actually an interesting question. First of all, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you to get on LinkedIn because all the other career experts are saying to get on LinkedIn. This was back in 2006. It was new-ish, but everybody knew that it was like job-centric. And but I didn't know, really. I didn't know what to do or how to get value out of LinkedIn. And I thought, okay, this is actually going to be some really good, important, valuable stuff. And why not? Let's jump into it and figure out what to tell my uncle, like how to get value out of LinkedIn. And I thought, okay, I could do probably 100 blog posts. Really, I could do 100 blog posts on stuff to do or not do on LinkedIn, how to optimize this and tweak that and network here and do all this other stuff. But then I thought, I kind of have always wanted to write a book. So maybe I'll start that process. I don't like doing what I call the dance. The dance is when you're looking for money from investors, or when you're trying to get a book deal, or when you're trying to do something where you like have to spend a lot of time to impress somebody and so they can make a decision to say yes to you, whatever that means. And so anyways, I thought I really want to write a book. I think that would be better than doing 100 blog posts because I had already established myself as a blogger, and there wasn't anything wrong with that. But like, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, already had a plan for doing the rest. But I wondered if maybe having a book would be maybe good, kind of somehow. And so anyways, all right. So in the blogging world, this is back in 2006, which in the blog world is like in the 1800s. So in Salt Lake, me and a couple friends started putting together these monthly blogger dinners. And we just reached out to other people who blogged locally. And every month we'd go to a restaurant, and we were kind of the rowdiest table there. And we would laugh and tell stories and just have a really good time. And I worked at home. So for me, it was like my social professional networking. And so anyways, I was heading to Austin. I don't remember why, but I was heading to Austin, and I thought, well, let's do a blogger's dinner there. And so I pulled together 3 of my friends who I didn't really know, but I kind of knew them through blogging. And I said, hey, let's go have dinner. And so we had the Austin blogger dinner down there. This is the only time I ever went, was the time I invited other people. Well, 2 of those other people were authors. Scott Allen, who wrote The Virtual Handshake, and he is brilliant. He's a Mensa level smart. And Tom Singer, who at the time was doing, I think, marketing for law firms, and has since become a professional speaker, which has been really, really fun to watch him grow. And so anyways, I said, hey, I have some questions. I want to write a book, I think. Do I want to do self-published? What about ebook versus print? Hardcover versus paperback? Like, help me out, you guys. Scott and Tom both had books, and so I was just picking their brains, and so Scott says, well, what's your book on? Like, what are you interested in writing about? And I said, well, I want it to be about LinkedIn. And I think the title should be, I'm on LinkedIn, now what? That's the question my uncle asked me. And it was a brilliant question. And I thought, man, that would make an awesome title. And so he didn't even think about it. He just immediately said, come with me. I'll take you to my publisher. I'll be your executive editor. And I was like, okay, I don't have to do the dance. So anyways, we got on a call and talked to the publisher out of Silicon Valley and got a contract. And so here's the deal. I sat on the contract because everybody said, you don't make money writing books. That's what everybody said, unless you're, one of the biggies. And there are very few of those. Actually, my publisher later on, when we were having money conversations, he said, you won't sell more than 500 books. No business book sells, with very few exceptions, more than 500 copies, right? And part of those, you got to wonder if it's the author, him or herself, who is buying those copies. So anyways, I got this contract to write a book, but I didn't do anything with it because every time I had time to sit down to write the book, I thought I really should be marketing for Jibber Jabber, or I need to do product development, or I need to do customer support, or I need to do whatever. I need to do other stuff that's going to make my company and my business money. And, books just isn't going to be it. So anyways, so I go to a conference for bloggers. Remember, this is back in the olden days. I go to a conference for bloggers, and Andy Cernovitz was speaking. And I wish I could remember. This was in Chicago. And Andy was really brilliant, actually. He was a keynoter. I think he was the last keynote. And so anyways, he's on stage, and Andy founded the Word of Mouth Marketing Association. And so he gets up and he says, I'm going to teach you 4 or 5 things that you can do right now to get word of mouth for your stuff, your blog, or whatever your business is. And I was like, well, I absolutely need word of mouth marketing for Jibber Jabber. So I'm ferociously taking notes and really interested in what he's saying. And I'm like, okay, that's a good idea. And that's a good idea. And I think I can do that, maybe do that. And then at the end, he says, all right, so if none of these ideas work for you, and I'm like, yeah, right, whatever. That's what all consultants say, right? They're like, here's the 3 silver bullets. And if they don't work for you, then here's an out. Well, what he said was so brilliant and so inspirational. So he says, if none of these ideas work for you, then find a brand or a company that is getting word of mouth marketing and figure out how you can latch onto it. This was, I think, early 2008. So 12 years ago. Guys, LinkedIn, I mean, holy cow. If you remember back in the mid 2010, probably 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, LinkedIn was a big deal. Tons of people were getting on. They were talking about, this many people are signing up every day. And every person who had any expertise in job search said you had to get on LinkedIn. And there were no books on it. There was actually 1 or 2 books for recruiters on how to use LinkedIn, but there was no books for the regular person. And so after months and months of sitting on this contract, because it was never going to go anywhere, I heard the message I heard from Andy was, latch on to a brand that can get you word of mouth marketing. And to be honest with you, I needed to hold on with both hands pretty tight because I had no idea what latching on to the LinkedIn brand in the early growth phase was going to do. So I walk out, Andy sits down, I walk out into the hallway of the hotel where the conference was. I call my publisher and I said, hey, I'm going to a conference in September and I need books. I need boxes of books. I will sell them. And he's like, well, that's not enough time. I think it was like in the spring, maybe April or May. He says, that's not enough time. We need you to get your manuscript, and then it takes time to edit and then copy edit and layout edit and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And they have like 150 things they do on the editor side or on the publisher side. And then they're going to have to print them and then ship them to me or the hotel or whatever. And he's like, I really don't think we can do it. And I said, well, how much time do you need? Long story short, I said, if I get you a manuscript in 2 weeks, will you commit to this? And he was like, yeah, if you can get me a manuscript in 2 weeks, then let's do it. And I did. And it took a lot of work. I mean, I had already had ideas and I had already started the process of writing but I had, I just got stuck so many times. And really, like I was saying, I got derailed with stuff that I thought was more valuable for, places to spend my time. So anyways, I get the book out and I get it printed, and this is the second edition. So I have 4 editions of this book, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. I think the only thing that's changed is this little, I don't remember what it's called, exploding star. There's some term for it. So this book was amazing. Now, what I want to talk about is the impact that this had on my personal brand. So when I started Jibber Jobber, I had an undergraduate degree and I had an MBA, and I became an entrepreneur in the software startup world. And so that was all kind of my brand. And then Jibber Jobber was obviously for job seekers. And so I became a job search expert, right? Which is funny because people are like, oh, Jibber Jobber, will you check out my resume? And I'm like, no, I don't like resumes. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm not good at reviewing resumes, and I don't write resumes. So that's not my thing. But so anyways, so my thing was, my brand was Jibber Jobber. And then when I wrote the book on LinkedIn, right now, look at this book. It's not that long, really. It's 100 and something pages, which is funny because the first 9 pages, no, not 9. The first lot of pages, though, are reviews that I got from people. I mean, I really beefed this up with there wasn't as many reviews as there was words in my book. It was around 20,000 words, but it was interesting that the book, some people called it a pamphlet, right? And some people actually went on Amazon and they said, this book sucks and it's no good, and I already knew all this stuff. And I was like, man, you guys are jerks. Like, what a turd to actually go into Amazon and leave a review like that. Well, funny story. I'll save that story for later. I didn't like my first edition. I thought it was fine, but then I reviewed it and did my second edition, and I was like, man, that one was horrible. And then I did my third edition, thought the second one was bad, and the fourth edition thought the third one was bad. And I guess it's good that I was always improving, but I never became happy with it. Point is, though, when I wrote the LinkedIn book, it like solidified my expertise in the job search space, and it propelled me as an expert on LinkedIn, which is funny because this was, 2000, what was that? Probably 2007-ish, 2008. And there was a thing back then called Yahoo Groups. So this was an email list that was kind of like a social environment. And I was on a Yahoo group full of LinkedIn enthusiasts. And there was people on that group who would talk about LinkedIn and the consulting they were doing for companies, or the consulting they were doing for individuals, and the speeches they were giving and all this stuff. And I thought, man, you guys are some serious experts on this. To be honest with you, there was at least 24 people that I could have named by name who should have written the book. And none of them did, except this one guy who he found out when I was writing my book, came out on a Monday, and he put his book out like this Saturday or Friday before that, just so he could be the first book. So anyways, in my circles, nobody ever heard of his book. But what happened was I went to this September conference with a bunch of career coaches and resume writers, and they're like, oh man, this book is awesome. Well, I'm going to tell you something. The book wasn't awesome. The book sucked. The title was awesome. I mean, seriously and honestly, this title is really, really good because this is the question that tens, maybe hundreds of millions of people have asked, right? Over time. They get on LinkedIn and they're like, okay, nothing's happening. How come recruiters aren't reaching out to me? And so, whatever they got out of the book, whatever. Hopefully people got stuff out. And there were plenty of people who told me that they liked the book. And I had career coaches who told me that this was required reading. If they had a new client, the client had to buy this and a few other books. This was required reading, which is awesome. Okay, so we're talking about personal branding, right? So my brand was like solidified in the career space because of this book that I wrote and because Jibber Jobber is a career tool. Okay, so those two things. Now, the next book, and by the way, I swore to my wife and myself that I would never write another book because it was really intense. Like it was only 20,000 words, which I don't know, I guess that's like 40 blog posts or something like that. It wasn't a ton of writing, but it was a lot of critical thinking. I remember thinking, if I write a blog post and I make a mistake, I can go fix the blog post and it's no big deal. If you write a book and run 500 or 1,000 copies of the book, you're not fixing that until the second edition, right? And like I said, most people don't sell 500. By the way, my LinkedIn book, if I remember correctly, has sold somewhere around 25,000. So that did considerably better than what the publisher said it would do. Okay, so I swore that I'd never write another book. Remember my blog group, my bloggers dinner in Utah? So I was talking with a guy that I met there, and we became friends. And he had just sold an app, a Facebook app, and I said, "Hey, let's get together and write a book on Facebook," because my LinkedIn book was doing really well. And I thought, Facebook is this up and coming thing. Maybe people will want a book on that. And so I wrote this book with Jesse and Rachel. And it was actually really interesting because this book did horrible. I don't know what the numbers are. I think it may have sold 1,000. I could be completely off. Maybe it was 2,000. Maybe it was 5,000 or 200. Maybe it was 5,000. I don't know. But this was my second book. So now I have the LinkedIn book, which was obviously a part of my business and Jibber Jobber and my expertise and my brand. But what happened when you threw in the Facebook book, right? So what do you think this did for my brand? This is where it gets really interesting. Up until this point, I was being invited to speak at places, job clubs, workforce services, university career centers, career center sponsored, for the MBA program, even for some companies on how to use LinkedIn. I'm getting flown around the country and Turkey, so international speaker because I went to Turkey once, and getting paid really well. Usually $5,000. Sometimes I drop it down to $2,000 depending on who they were and where they were and stuff like that. But usually $5,000. Good money, especially considering my books. I mean, I sold a lot of books, but I wasn't making $5,000 for an hour worth of work, right? So speaking was pretty awesome. When I wrote the Facebook book, something really interesting happened. I started getting interest from people outside of the job world completely, people that didn't care about job search at all. I started getting interest in speaking at places that wanted to talk about social marketing. Now, I don't know, when I'm saying this right now, it makes a lot of sense. But when it was happening, I had no idea that is what was going to happen to my brand. It was actually really quite interesting that I started to, I think, expand what my brand was or how people perceived me from job search, career, and LinkedIn to job search, career, LinkedIn, and social marketing. But it made sense because I'd been blogging for a few years, and I was on Twitter back then pretty actively. I took years off. I'm back on Twitter now, pretty active. I was doing social marketing stuff, but I didn't think of myself as a social marketer. And I don't think anybody thought of me as a social marketer until I had 2 books on social marketing. Now, my intention was not to write books on social marketing. These were more of a user, like how does an individual user get value out of this? But I started getting phone calls from people saying, hey, we got this social marketing event, or we have the marketing event, or come talk to our marketing team or something like that. And it just blew my mind what that second book did for my brand. All right, fast forward a couple years. Again, I swore that I would not write another book. And so here I am. I got this really cool idea, and I started kind of pitching it from on stage, where I talked about having multiple streams of income and being empowered because you're creating revenue that's outside of your job. And so things like that. And then I think on stage once I pitched the idea about, I'm thinking about writing a book called 101 Alternatives to a Real Job, which is kind of a cute title. Everybody wants a real job, right? Whatever that means, like a career job. But the people that I was speaking at in job clubs, these were people who were sick and tired of the job search. They'd just recently been burned by something in their career. And I know that a lot of people were thinking, I need a job, but I don't want one. It's like out of the frying pan into the fire. This is stupid, right? So anyways, I pitched this idea a few times from on stage. And I remember one time I was at I think it was the McLean, no, let me think. Yeah, it was the McLean Bible Church. It was a pre-session. So I did a pre-session, and then I did a keynote a little bit later that evening. And at the pre-session, there was maybe 60 or 70 people. And I talked about this book, and there was a line of probably 30 or 40 people. Like most people stayed and got in a line to talk to me. And my topic that night was on LinkedIn. I talked a little bit about careers and career management and job search, but I was saving most of that for the rest of the evening. And then I talked about this idea of writing a book and the 101 alternatives to a real job. Most every person in that line asked me about the book. They didn't ask me about LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn had already been like pounded and they got it. And there were plenty of sessions on LinkedIn. They didn't ask me about Jibber Jobber. They didn't ask me about career management or job search tactics. Everybody was like, I want that book. I'm so interested in alternatives to the rat race and all the stuff that comes with having a normal job. So I started this new book project, and it was called 101 Alternatives to a Real Job, until I got like probably 25 or 30 into it. And I thought, man, this is way too many. So it became 51 Alternatives to a Real Job, which is actually still plenty. This is actually a thicker book than the other ones that I have done. So the reason why I switched it to 51 is because in addition to I wanted this to be more than a blog post, right? Because I can write a list of 100 alternatives to a real job, but I wanted to put some meat behind it and some of my thoughts behind it. And I wanted to interview people who were actually doing it. And so once I got to about 25 or 30, I was like, there is no way I'm going to do this with 101 people and 101 different revenue streams. So anyways, I decided to just easily change the title from 101 to 51 alternatives to a real job. So this one was kind of interesting. I actually self-published. Here on the spine, you can see it says Jibber Jobber. It's actually not even spelled correctly. There's not a typo, but there's a space where there shouldn't be. I don't know how that slipped past us. But this was my first self-published book. And what I learned in the first process of, I think, 4 editions of the LinkedIn book and 2 editions of the Facebook book was that, for me to self-publish, it didn't take a whole lot more. And so I took one of my books into a local print shop, and everybody has a print shop near them. The places that you're driving down the highway and there's signs that they print signs and they print, flyers, and they print all kinds of stuff. And so I took this 1 or 2 of my books into the print shop, and I said, I want this right here. Because they ask you all these questions, like, do you want, glossy or blah, 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 and what kind of paper and how big? And I'm like, this is exactly what I want. I don't know how many pages it'll be, but just take this, and then that answers all your questions. And so I think I paid about $1,000 for layout and copy editing. I had that done by one person. Thank you, darling. And then I want to say I paid $3 or $4 a book to have them printed. So I was into this probably another $1,000 or $2,000. I honestly can't remember right now. And so it's kind of interesting because if I buy my own book from my publisher, I'm going to pay anywhere from like $8 to I think $12, depending on how many books I buy. If you go the Amazon route, which is totally fine, I think you pay, what is it? You pay or you get 1/3. I think it's a third of the price of the book is a third. Sorry, the cost of the book is a third of the price. And so that's pretty cool because it's just in time, right? So you upload your document into Amazon. They have all kinds of tools, make your covers, blah, 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 do all that stuff, get your ISBN, and then you don't have any inventory. And if you ever want one, you just buy one for 66% of the full price. I didn't want to do that, though. I actually thought, I actually want to have more margin. I want to keep more of the margin for myself. And so I don't know, it was only a few dollars per book, but that's where I was at. All right. So what has this done for me? So the first book, as I mentioned, the I'm on LinkedIn has like solidified me in the career world. The Facebook book expanded it. So now I am a social marketing expert, right? And then the 51 Alternatives book got me into the more entrepreneur and revenue streams. So I was actually in Texas a year ago and I did, I think, 6 keynotes, and I took a bunch of my 51 Alternatives books and I said, hey, if you buy my Jibber Jobber, and I don't remember all the stuff I had, but if you buy this and this, then I will give you the 51 Alternatives to a Real Job book. And once again, it was popular. Like, people wanted the book. All right, the fourth book, and I don't think I've announced this yet. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think if I have. I've sent it out to a handful of people, but the fourth book is in line with the new company that I just invested in. It's called Snowfly, spelled Snowfly, snowfly.com. And Snowfly does online incentives and rewards. So for example, if you work somewhere and you do something right, somebody could say, hey, I give Jason 1,000 points or tokens or whatever, and then I can go convert those points or tokens into real money, whether they're prizes or an Amazon gift card or a Visa card or whatever. And so that is the premise of Snowfly. So Snowfly really focuses on employee performance and employee engagement and employee satisfaction. And all of these things become what you might call culture, right? And so let me back up a couple years ago when I was working at a company. And at this company, they had just designed a system that would help measure your culture or the sentiment of people that people had about your culture. And so everybody's seen this survey around when you go to like Home Depot or Walmart or whatever grocery store, and at the bottom they circle it and say, hey, you can have a chance to win $5,000 if you fill out this survey online. You go online and it's basically what's called an NPS, the Net Promoter Score, where you answer 0 to 10, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your experience, or would you recommend us, or whatever simple question. And then the second question is, why did you give us that rating? Why did you give us an 8, 9, or a 10, or a 1, or a 2, or whatever the number was? And so they're looking for a quantification, and they're also looking for a reasoning, right? And so at this company, they developed this thing called the employee NPS, the ENPS, and you can go look it up. There's a whole bunch of companies that create that do this and offer this now. And so as I was thinking about that and how flawed the NPS is, because I don't like the NPS, I think it's a stupid question, and I think it gives you goofy results. That's just me. I was thinking about other surveys that companies do. And so the ENPS question was something like, how likely are you to recommend us as a workplace to your friends and family? And I was like, I don't really have friends or family that should work here. I mean, it's not you, it's my friends and family that's the problem, right? And so the question is just flawed for a whole bunch of different reasons. And so anyways, let me fast forward. here I am working at Snowfly, which is a culture company. Really, it's incentives and performance, but the whole gist of the system and the objective is to improve the culture. So what did I do? Can you guess? I wrote a book. I didn't want to write a book. I didn't have time to write a book, but I had an idea and I just needed to get it out. Now, here's where it gets really cool. This book is an ebook. When I get on stage and I'm talking about career management 2.0 or 3.0, and I'm talking about personal branding, I say, how many people here have ever wanted to write a book? And out of 100 people, maybe 3 or 4 people will raise their hand. And I say, okay, I am going to help the rest of you learn how to write a book very easily, really easily. And I start talking about, the very simple and basic steps to write a book, because I believe that everybody has expertise in something, okay? I think in the olden days, we thought that we had to be really deep experts, like PhD level, and we had to write a textbook with a whole bunch of citations and pages of bibliography. And, that's what the idea of a book was back in the olden days. I wish I had one here right now. I don't have one, but Mark LeBlanc has a book, and it's about this big. It'll fit in your shirt pocket. And I think Mark was saying that for years and years and years, he can give you the numbers on this, but years and years, he has had a bulk purchase of his books every week without missing a week. He has had 4 years and years consistently bulk purchases, but I promise you that he's made way more money because he is an author speaking and consulting than he is as someone who's written a book. Okay, so what I'm saying is the book doesn't have to be big. You have expertise in something. The book, this is one of my favorite lines, the book gives you credibility as an expert. Okay, when I wrote that book, the LinkedIn book, and there was 24 other people that should have written the book, but they were too busy consulting on LinkedIn. When I wrote the book, I was the one getting phone calls from TV, news, and newspapers and radio. I shouldn't have been the one, except that I wrote the book, right? Just because somebody is more expert or smarter than you doesn't mean you shouldn't be the person to write the book. Now, let me tell you the secret. All of these books are at least 20,000 words. So the LinkedIn book is 20,000. And then the Facebook's a little bit more, and then the alternatives is a lot thicker. So I don't know how many words it was. I didn't care because I didn't have a publisher that had a word requirement. My book on culture and measuring culture, not ENPS, but through a completely different mechanism. My book on culture is 17 pages. It is an ebook, right? I'm not going to print it. I don't think it'll ever go to print because nobody's going to buy a 17-page book. That is a pamphlet, really. When I started sending it out and got feedback on it, I found that people had some really, really interesting ideas and opinions about culture. And I thought, okay, I could put this in this ebook, but it kind of doesn't fit. Like, it doesn't fit the purpose of the ebook, and it really would just expand what the ebook is into something a lot bigger than what I want. So maybe I'll write a second book, and it'll probably be 20 or 30 pages, but it'll still be short. But I'm calling it a book, and since it's a book, it gives me credibility as an expert. Now, anybody out there who has actually written a book, or they're mega book nerds, sometimes they get really offended. They're like, you can't write 17 pages and call it a book and have no citations and all that stuff. Let me tell you an example of how I would use this in the job search. So let's say you're interviewing for a product manager job, whatever you're interviewing for, okay? So you're in the middle of this interview and they ask you a question. Hey, what's your experience with this? Or tell us about your opinions on this. Or, I see this on your resume. Can you tell us anything more about it? One of the coolest answers that you will ever give because you will stand out so far, okay, is if you were to say, and this has to be true, so do it before you say it. But if you were to say something like, I actually wrote a book on that. Can I send it to you? You don't have to say it's an ebook. You don't have to say you're going to email it to them. But if I were interviewing and somebody sent me a PDF afterwards and said, hey, we were talking about this in the interview. I wrote this a couple of years ago. I thought you might be interested in it. Clearly, you can see that I've been thinking a lot about this topic or been passionate about this topic for quite a while. Do you think you're going to stand out in the interview? Holy cow, absolutely. I've interviewed a lot of people before and nobody has said, I wrote a book on this. Can I send it to you? So, okay, let's wrap this whole concept up. My books, I did not understand this, but the variety in the books that I have, they shaped and they shifted how people perceived my expertise, okay? All I'm doing is I'm inviting you to show your credibility as an expert or your passion in a topic by writing a book. Does it need to be this? Does it need to cost thousands of dollars? No. It can be a 17-page ebook. You don't have to sell it. Don't even worry about selling it. You don't have to worry about people downloading it. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You don't have to worry about the technology of it. You don't have to worry about a hit to the ego when nobody downloads it. But when that one person says, hey, what do you know about this topic? And you say, I wrote a book on that. Can I send it to you? That might be a hiring manager. It might be someone in an interview process. It might be someone in a network event where they're looking for credibility for something so they can partner with you, right? Or they want to buy your stuff or whatever it is. The idea of having a book as a branding tool is amazing. And for me, it was probably the most important personal branding thing that I have ever done. So, all right, we've gone on long enough. Thanks for sticking with me. I have these 4 books. Don't buy them. I actually only have a few more of the 51 alternatives left, and I use those when I go speak. The LinkedIn and the Facebook books are just out of date. They really are. But what they've done for my brand will never go out of date. So my invitation to you is to think about writing your own book. If you have any questions, I'm jason@jibberjabber.com, and I'd love to chat with you about it. In the comment or the description area of the YouTube video, there's a link to a course about writing and marketing your own book. It's about 3 hours long. It's on Pluralsight, and you should be able to have access to it through the 10-day free trial or whatever from Pluralsight. All right, go write your book. Think about your personal brand. Be intentional about this stuff. Good luck.